So right before we hit record, you said everything's an experiment. And I
Yes.
love that. So my question is, in art, in creativity, is it all just an experiment, or do you eventually get to a point where it's like, oh yeah, this is it. This is what is it like?
Yeah, I think experimenting is part of the process. And so it's a place where a lot of times I say it's where you play. It's where you break things. It's where you ask the questions and follow curiosity. Now, if you have a project that you know exactly what it is that you're intending to do, and there's kind of a goal attached to that creativity, then that still may be a part of things, but the actual outcome, you have more in mind of what you want the thing to look like. And so I do believe, though, that there is a bit of things are an experiment because everything around us and within us is constantly changing. And so if we're not adapting to that, we're really not getting the best possible. And sometimes it's easy to fall into ruts and routines that don't really serve us or what it is that we're trying to create if we're not open to let's experiment.
Yeah, and I think it's giving ourselves permission to be messy in the
Hmm.
creative process. Like if it was supposed to be in a container in a fixed way, it wouldn't give us that accidental beauty that we get out of creativity, that it's like, I never knew that could make that. And it's
Exactly.
but it's the same with like healing too. Everyone has this Instagrammable version of like, oh, I took some deep breaths and now I am just perfect. And in reality, you're sitting there like curled up in a ball on the floor going, ah!
Yeah.
It's meant to be messy, and I feel like people forget that that's a part of creating your health, your art, your anything.
Hmm.
It's meant to look jacked up for a while,
Yeah.
because you learn so much more from your mistakes, and like you said, breaking things and being able to do that. So how, I know you have a story about it, how has heart art helped you heal? Like, what was your process to become the artist and advocate for creating that you are now?
Yeah. So, I was much like the typical kid who was the artist, always doing things, creating greeting cards, giving it to family members, seeing their faces light up, going like, I like this. This is fun. This is something I'm good at. And I want to pursue this. Right. And so along the way, hit burnout in the career of graphic design and just felt like part of the machine and really just walked away from my creativity and my art for about 10 years. And, it was in that season where really wasn't doing anything creatively. I was doing some other things that I really wasn't in my skill set. It wasn't really aligned, honestly. And I underestimated the importance of creativity for me personally beyond professionally. And what that ended up looking like was me falling into depression. And along with a bunch of life circumstances, being in this place where I was at rock bottom and found myself where I'm like, I need to sell my home. We need to move. I don't really know what's coming next career wise. Loss of friends and family and all the surroundings that were familiar. And in the midst of that, my dad getting diagnosed with cancer and passing quickly. And so I'm kind of laying at the bottom of this ditch and, emotionally saying, is this it? Is this life now? Like, how did we get here? And more importantly, how do we get out? Can we get out? And it was in that place where I started to hear this voice inside me saying, you need to return to your art and your creativity because at one time it brought you joy. Like, not thinking clients, not thinking budgets, not thinking all the stuff that we attach to our creativity when we're making a living from it. But remember the kid who was making things and just in love with that? Is that possible? And honestly, I was like, I don't really know, but what else do I have to lose at this point? And so I started to be open to this idea, not really sure what it was going to look like. And someone had introduced me to this thought of a 365-day art making journey, which honestly, it just scared me because I'm like, I haven't showed up for the last 10 years. How am I going to show up for this next year every single day? But I was like, again, I'm going to be open. We'll see what this looks like. And the idea there was just show up every day and create something, pretty much. And I was used to having projects from being in graphic design, And so I gave myself projects. I was like, let's see what happens if I do 7 days of this particular theme or this particular medium. And 7 days was enough for me to get engaged, show up for 15 minutes a day, because that's really all I could do and manage, even with my energy level and being depressed. But it was something. And so I said, this is all an experiment. We're going to see where this leads, if any place, and just be open. And as I engaged with this process, it started to unlock some things in me. It started to have some life and health return in me. And I started to figure out some things of like, I really don't like doing this. I like doing this other thing instead. Or I don't really like using that medium. I really want to use this medium. And so it was all just collecting data and figuring this out and going, I'm making the rules here. So, let's just continue to see what happens. And so engaging with that process, I got to the end of a year and I was like, I did it. I actually showed up every single day. And not everything I created was something that I was going to hang on a wall or sell or really, see any ready available value in, but I was like, it's still collectively showing me that I was on a journey. And that's the important thing. Because day one was me going to a Starbucks, sketching this really awful Starbucks coffee cup, and it was embarrassing. And I was like, if people knew that I went to art school and drew this thing, they'd be like, dude, what happened? Like, your capacity is so diminished. But I had to embrace where I was. And so this whole journey really ushered me into not just getting connected again with my creativity and figuring out what this looked like, but it was bringing some healing. It was bringing some rediscovery and remembering of like, oh, this is who I used to be. Even though I was doing some creative things, for a living, it looked different. When I started asking the question of like, what do I want to say? What is it that I want to do? And gave myself a place to play and experiment and do those things, that's when things really started to shift. And so after a year, I said, well, okay, I did this. Now what? And I was like, I don't think I'm done. So I kept going and kept going and kept going. And now we're like 12 years in, and I've done something every single day. And some of that stuff is not necessarily visual art anymore. Sometimes it's now writing, because I've kind of embraced that creative expression as well. But it's always making sure that I make this time for myself and my creativity, because I know how important it is and I know where it leads. And I uncovered this process that was at work that I now help other people with, who are struggling with their creativity or with a sense of fun and play in their creativity. And all the stuff emerged from my personal journey, and it has now come back around into the work that I do.
Yeah, and I think that it's really hard for people when they make creating their career, because how often have we seen it where it's like, oh my, I enjoy this, I love this, and then you make it an income and all of a sudden like the
Yes.
magic goes away from it. I know, so I was raised very traditional, very old school, and so like cooking and baking is a normal like thing for me and my family, and I was told dozens and dozens of times, just open a bakery like
Hmm.
that. And I'm like, God, no, no, I would,
Yeah.
it would suck my soul dry. And they said, why? You could make money at this. I'm like, because it would never be fun again. If
Yeah.
I had to wake up and know that I had to make cookies that day, because I don't think you know this. Like right before Christmas, there is a 4-day dead zone where I go dark and I make thousands of cookies and treats and stuff. And then that's the gift that everyone gets, with like a cute little bow on top and stuff. And I'm like, yeah, I want to do that for 4 days and ignore everything, and have Netflix on in the background. That
Right.
brings me joy. If someone was like, no, now do that once a week and I'd be like, oh, I don't hate myself enough to take away my joy of creating. But it happens and it happens because people feel like they're pressured into it. I know a lot of
Hmm.
times when it's like, you're so good at this, you should do it. And then people do it and they're like, this is nothing like creating for self. This
Hmm.
is, uh, I want to say hard, but it definitely changes the perspective. I know my creative journey. I am not like you. I am not a badass artist. I am very much like an old lady. I like scrapbooking. That's where
Yeah.
it's at for me. And I scrapbooked and made cards and everything. And one day when I was in my like late teens, early 20s maybe. My mom's friend came over to the house and I had a giant table covered with scrapbooking supplies out in the living room. I commandeered the living room and she just tore me apart. She was, this is what's wrong with this, and she spent 30 minutes picking apart what I had spent like 2 days creating. And I hated scrapbooking. I packed it all up. She was so negative that I was like, nope, I can't do this. And it was, oh, 5 to 7 years before I scrapbooked again. And I set everything out on the table, and literally it felt like taking a deep breath for the first time. Like, since putting it away, I was holding my breath and just like not expressing myself in that way. And there are many different ways that we can express ourselves, but
Hmm.
let's be
Yeah.
honest, art's where it's at. Like, art is an expression. And it was, it felt so good, and to not have anyone else around and to do it for me, not because someone else is going to comment on it. It doesn't matter if it's crap or not. It matters that I enjoyed making the little blue bird go inside the little leaf. Like, because that, it was a card, it was a thing, it was cute.
Yeah.
But that's like, creating is like breathing. It's like this natural expression of self that is so much better when we don't put the confines of, and by all means, like, make money off of it, people. Like, if that is your career, rock it out, but don't do what we did and go towards burnout or go towards resentment and then like shove it in a drawer for a decade. it's it's about really being authentic with yourself. So with with art, I have a weird question for you.
Sure.
Art is expansive, like, and not just, I'm gonna butcher these words, I'm so sorry, not just medium art, like creating with paint, pastels, clay, but any kind of art, song, writing, anything. Because it's so vast, is it always authentic? Like, can creating art be a form of authenticity, even if it's with a different medium every single time? Or does it have, for authenticity, and when I say authenticity, I mean authenticity of self, not authenticity to
Hmm.
like
Sure.
postmodern expressionism.
Hmm.
How does authenticity work with creating when it's so vast?
Yeah. I think it comes down to a lot of awareness for yourself and saying, what does it look like for me to be authentic? Like, what is it that is important to me? What do I value? And how is that going to come out in what I create? And so I think there are certain times when the creative vehicle, if you will, is secondary. Because I could come up with this idea and I could think, man, this is really what I want to talk about. This is really what I want to express. And this is authentic to who I am and what's happening in my life right now. And I want to communicate that with people. And then I can say, okay, well, I'm perhaps talented or gifted in a couple of different areas. What would that look like in terms of it being visual art, a painting, digital art that I do? What would that look like if I were to write a blog post about that and share an experience and a story around that? What would that look like? And so I go through these things internally to ask myself of like almost like what's the best mode of creativity for this expression? And maybe there's multiple, right? Maybe I write a blog post and I do a piece of art that goes along with it, and it further enhances the message that I'm trying to put out there. Um, and so I think it's awareness of who you are, of what you value, and what you want to say. And then from there, it's making sure that you keep that intact in your creation process so that you're not simply copying something else, mimicking somebody else, um, or fall into this thing where it gets muddy in the creation process, where you're so bogged down by what it is that you're doing and those internal voices and this doesn't look right, I messed up on this, and all those things, that you don't get trapped by that and then lose what it is that you're actually trying to say.
I love that. And at the beginning, you had talked about values and like authenticity. No matter who you are, you should be following your values with your self care, with your healing process, with creating. And that can evolve. Like,
Oh yeah.
think about when you were 20 years old. Do you have the exact same values as you do now? I know a lot of people who are idealists who say, oh no, I believe the same things that I did when I was 20. I'm like, you live under a rock. Like, you, and that's fine, bless your cotton socks. But no, that's not. like I think of who I was at 20 and I'm like, wow, I really do. There are certain things that I still value, but I value them very differently now that I've grown up. That
Hmm.
it's like I value family with boundaries. I value health without resentment. Like it it evolves as you grow. And so like your art will too. And
Hmm.
like you said, some of it is this would be good as a song or a blog post. This would be good as a painting. And it's to have it be authentic is really just knowing what's best for you. Like you said, self
Hmm.
awareness. And part of self awareness is healing. Like you want it to be coming from yourself, not from like your trauma or resentment. And I know trauma is something that people talk about a lot, but I know that like with art, it exhibits an emotion, right? And as people who like post art that was during their like messy time of healing, you can like feel it. It's like, whoo, that had some rage in
Hmm.
it.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, how can you feel that? It's like, how can you not? It's like permeating from the canvas, letting you know that like this was a thing and it's
Hmm.
fine now, but it was a thing then. So I think that that's really important for people to understand about creating art, about it being authentic to them. It doesn't matter what it looks like. Like we would love it if it all looked great, wouldn't we? If it was just every piece is a masterpiece. Yes. No, it's not though. It is so messy. And some art, I think you would agree with this. Some art is just for self.
Hmm.
Like
Yeah.
some things you create at a point in your life and you put it in a drawer. It's like, yep, that was for me. And you pull it out and it's like, yay, look at how much I've overcome. Look at what I've done with my life and everything. It's not again in the land of Instagrammable art.
Hmm.
It's not look what I made for my survivor story. It's like, nope, that's just for me in a drawer. Like I know I have art that I have not made, I have bought. Not gonna lie. I totally support local artists. I think they're fabulous because I can't do that stuff. But it's a way in a drawer and it's like, yep, I take it out or I keep it like in it's up in like my bedroom or something like that, where it's like, yep, this is just for me to signify this
Hmm.
point in my life to celebrate or heal or whatever, that art doesn't have to be shared with anyone to be impactful,
Hmm.
right?
Well, sometimes the process of creating art or being in a creative process gives you a place to process. And for some people, that's enough, right? Like, I don't have plans on selling this thing. I just am trying to work through something right now and make sense of the pieces and work through some emotional things and some thoughts or whatever I'm having. And I need a place to do that. And some people do that, they like to they like to talk out loud and figure things out audibly, right? Other people like to do that in a sense of I'm going to, like, I have a friend of mine who, she said, if it weren't for poetry, she would just shrivel up because that's her place to process and make sense of some of the things that are happening in her life. And so for all of us that looks different, but again, I think it goes back to the awareness piece of going, like, be a student of yourself, know how you process things, how you need to process things, give yourself opportunities to try those things, and don't get caught up in whether or not this is something that goes and hangs on your wall, gets sold, whatever. Like, there may be things that you revisit and go, you know what? I had to work through that and it felt a little too close for me to actually share this in public because I didn't want to bleed it all over everybody, right?
Yeah.
But now that I've had some time and some perspective, I can share this from a different place, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. It's all about the process. Like
Mm-hmm.
healing and self-expression is all about the process, not the end result. And when people not only focus on the end result, but like the what to do with the end result, it it changes the energy of it and it makes it so much harder to execute it. That's where you walk towards burnout when you focus on like this is what this needs to be at the end. And obviously like if you're a graphic designer working with a client, the end result's going to matter. But
Yes.
when creating art for yourself, it's that hyperfixation. In healing, it's that hyperfixation of an ending that
Mm-hmm.
really blocks any kind of creativity because, like, well, it has to look like this at the end. And how
Mm-hmm.
often have we messed up our life, our art, relationships, and we're like, this right here, this picture in my head. And there's all those, there's countless famous quotes that are like, the thing that's ruining your life is that you have a picture in your head.
Hmm.
And once you take out that picture and it's like, just let it be whatever. Let it be weird or messy or unexpected, and that'll make it so much better. And it is about the process of creating and not the end result. So I think that that's really important for people who are healing and using art to heal. It's like,
Hmm.
oh, it's the process. Stop thinking it's going to look away at the end. It's not. It is not the Mona Lisa, and that's what reality is. And you wouldn't want it to be, because why would you want your journey to look like anybody else's, or your art to
Hmm.
look like anyone else's, unless you are a forger, who that's like the goal.
Yeah, yeah.
Then
Can I?
obviously work on Monet, but
Yes, yes. Can I just touch on something too? Like we talked a little bit about this whole idea of, when somebody's working for a living using their creativity. I think too many times people think of it in this either or, right? Either I work as and I use my creativity for to make a living, get paid for that, or I simply keep it as something that's more just personal expression, and I just do it on my own. I think it's actually an and both. Because having worked in a field where I was using my creativity for everybody else and not myself, and having that frustration of I'm creating all day long and yet I'm frustrated, and I come home and the last thing I have is energy to do something more in creative efforts and abilities, right? And so I was on this hamster wheel of like, I'm expecting my creative day job to fulfill a need for me in which it was never designed to do. And sometimes we don't ask ourselves the question of like, what is the goal there? Like, what is it? How can we define it? Not simply like, hey, I want to make money off my creativity, but like, what do we really want that to look like? And how can we set up places in our lives where we're making sure that we're fulfilling those needs and those desires that we have related to our creative efforts? Because then it's creating passion projects for ourselves that are outside of work, and carving out time to make sure that we do that, and maybe reserving a little bit of energy, because certainly if you're in a creative day job and you have a client, that's not the place for self-expression. That's not the place to just go, I'm going to do whatever. I don't really have a plan. I don't, they'd be like, bye. We're going to get somebody else in here. And so we need to be careful in how we approach those things, I think.
and it's you're right, it's about making space and time for both, if that is the
Hmm.
journey that you are on.
Exactly.
It's because I'm getting all uppity. I'm getting all uppity. You made such a good point. I'm getting into it. You cannot be naive enough to think that you do not have to create space for
Hmm.
your art. That it's because people are like, no, this is what I love to do, so it will just naturally happen. No, no.
Right.
You have to schedule time in the morning,
Hmm.
just like you do your self-care or meditation. You have to prioritize it, because it's this myth that it's like it'll happen. Like you said, at the end
Hmm.
of the day, the last thing you wanted to do was create for you after
Right.
creating for everybody else, and being told, well, could you just tweak this now? It's like,
Make the logo bigger.
yeah, it's like, no, it's in a format. Um,
Yes.
and that is just so, a thing that blocks people so often
Hmm.
is the fantasy of this, like, it's going to be beautiful, it's going to be fabulous, and I don't have to put any work into it, I don't
Right.
have to put any effort into it because I enjoy it.
Yeah.
It does take work, it does take effort, you do have to plan out time, and it has to be the time that works for you. Like,
Hmm.
I'm big on energy cycles and people following them, and you do stuff every day. I
Hmm.
know this, we've talked about it. I would hate your life. I would, oh, I love that you love it. If someone told me that I had to create something every single day, I would look at them and go, oh, I have so many four-letter words for you, none of them are ladylike. Oh, because I love doing things really intensely for like a few days and then shoving it away for like a month. So I'm great at, like I said, I'll spend 4 days straight cooking and baking and caramels and cookies and candies. And then I will not cook or bake anything for like a month. I'd be like, and now we're eating frozen meals that we pre-made before the bake-a-thon for later. So it's honoring however that looks to you. A lot of people need self-expression every day, and then it looks different. When I was in my mid 20s, I had someone tell me, do something creative every day. And I said, I don't want to write every day. I don't want to scrapbook every day. And they said, the clothing you choose is self-expression,
Mm-hmm.
is
Yep.
creating. That can be. So today I was like, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to wear something sparkly. I'm going to create the look that I want. And this was my creativity today. And so it doesn't have to look like the same thing, but it's little things. It doesn't have to be
Mm-hmm.
sculpting out of marble every day. It doesn't have to be
Right.
laborious. It's just something that makes you express yourself. And honestly, sometimes that's my social media posts,
Mm-hmm.
because I will do them on the fly, no makeup, in my hoodie, like in my pajamas, and just go, hey, I thought about this. Let's talk about it. Yay, authenticity. Um, and so it's honoring like when you have those spurts, but
Mm-hmm.
also like what can you do every day? It doesn't have to be big. So where do you think people should start? Because I know you have this beautiful thing. I'm gonna butcher it. I'm gonna look at my notes. That's how sure I am. Uh, what is a daily creative habit?
Mm-hmm.
You talk about that. That's your
Yeah.
specialty. You are high king shit at this. Let's tell me more. Tell me more.
Yes. Um, it is simply a process. Uh, and it's the one that emerged out of my personal journey, engaging with myself, engaging with my art and creativity. And it is something that I help other people who are looking for some access to their own creativity. Maybe their story is similar where they put their creativity on a shelf for a while, and because of seasons of life, because of responsibilities, practicalities, et cetera, et cetera. And now they're like, you know what? There's this pang in my heart. Every time I hear about this thing, every time I think about this thing, this creative act that I once loved, that I used to do, I haven't done it in a really long time. It haunts me and it won't go away. Like we need to listen to that. But the problem is then sometimes people go, well, I don't even know how to begin to engage with that again. I don't even know what that looks like at this point in my life. And so I walk people through this process that, you said, some people think, well, I don't really want to create every day. I'd rather do, nice intense blocks. And I'm like, great, if that's how you work and that's how you work and you will work, then do that. Be intentional about that. The point here is consistency, right? But sometimes people say, well, I'm waiting for the weekend where there's nothing going on. I'm waiting for the huge blocks of time. I'm waiting for a huge amount of money or really expensive materials or whatever the fill in the blank is that brings it to another level where all of a sudden it becomes a little too precious. It becomes a little too hard to attain. And therefore, they never actually engage with a process. And so I always encourage people, I'm like, look, start small. I had to start small because it was a necessity, because I didn't have anything in the tank. 15 minutes a day was all I could manage. But what I realized is that there's a cumulative effect there. 15 minutes a day for 2 months is a whole lot more than I was doing even when I wasn't depressed and was kind of flirting with my creativity, right? I'd be like, hey, how you doing, right? And it'd be like, we got some time, cool, let's go and do something, right? But then it was like it never really seemed to be able to because the do list was always there. There was always other priorities. There were always more practical things to do, right? Responsible things to do. And I think what happens is that stuff drowns out our ability to show up for our creativity. And when we don't show up for our creativity, we're not showing up for ourselves. And if we're not showing up for ourselves, we're not going to be the best versions of ourselves. And we're going to find that we're like cranky a lot more. And we're not able to engage with things. We don't have a sense of maybe purpose and play in our lives. And so a daily creative habit is simply that. It's a process of developing a habit of showing up every single day to choose yourself. And like you said, showing up every single day, we unpack that to go, what does that look like for you? I can tell you what it looked like for me and what it continues to look like for me, but let's contextualize it for you so that you're doing it with intention and purpose and you have a system that you're leveraging. Because when you have a system to leverage, you're not simply just waiting for the muse. And it's like, the muse didn't come at 3 o'clock on a Wednesday. I don't know what I'm gonna do. I just, you can't really nail down the muse. It's kind of like whenever it happens, I gotta be ready. And if I'm too busy, then I lost my opportunity, right? It's like, no, put it on your calendar, like you said before, because if it's important to you, you're going to block out time for it. And don't worry about sitting there with a blank cursor or the blank page or canvas and going like, I don't know what to do at this point. Because there are ways that you can start to actually capture inspiration when it's around you and not necessarily have to act on it in that moment. You kind of build this well and this arsenal of ideas and inspiration so that when you do have that time, you can refer back to it and go, oh yeah, that spoke to me. I really like that. Now I can start to use this because I have the time and place to do something with it, you know? So just get in there and start doing stuff.
Yes, you said it. It's the intention. It's the
Mm-hmm.
mindfulness of it. It's don't just expect it to happen, because the romanticized version is the muse will come. The Greek
Yes.
muses will float
Yes.
down from Olympus and shit ideas into your lap. Yes. And it's like, no, that's not what it's about. It's about you using your own soul, your own energy to create. And I love that you say, like, find something and then do it later. Because I do things where if I have like a ping or something I really want to do, I'll put it in my phone. I'll either
Mm-hmm.
do like a voice recording. It's like, hey, I have this idea. I want to do something with this. Or like text myself something. But the other thing that I do is I will have like one phrase or concept, and then I'll go live on social media and I will just straight up ramble about anything. And because for me, I have ADHD, I actually have no inner accountability. It doesn't really exist with the brain wiring, but I have such a strong following and I have such really dedicated clients that if I don't do something, they'll message me. You did
Mm-hmm.
not do Tarot Tuesday. What's wrong? Like, and it's like, okay, so I have to be accountable to something. And that made it easier for me, was having something outside of myself. And
Yeah.
I'll just ramble. But then I go back and I watch that ramble and I'll write a chapter of a book based on
Mm-hmm.
me rambling. And it's like, because if I, every time I sit down to write, just
Mm-hmm.
spoken, the key is like,
Yeah.
but if I rambled about something and then watch it, it's like, oh yeah, that, and I'll write pages and pages based off of a 15-minute ramble about self-love and why it means turtle doves and stuff like that. It was a weird Christmas themed one. And so it's finding what works for you, and everyone's is different, and that gentle
Mm-hmm.
curiosity to create. And we talk about creating, and we've loosely been talking about like this is a way to heal. Self-expression is a
Mm-hmm.
way to heal. Because I've noticed, and I don't know if you've noticed this too, please correct me if I'm wrong. um when people create every day something,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't matter if it's the cute hat, if you're writing a book in one day, it doesn't matter. They, whether anyone else sees it, they feel seen and heard and validated. When
Mm-hmm.
you create every day, it's not just in you, it's out, you've expressed yourself somehow, and that just makes you feel better. It makes you feel seen and heard, and that can really change someone's life when they're
Mm-hmm.
in depression, when they are stuck, when they are too close to burnout. Just feeling seen can be the thing that changes your life. Do you
Mm-hmm.
find that too
Yeah.
with your clients?
In terms of me creating for them, them creating, or
Them creating for themselves,
yeah.
like
Yeah.
the ones that you're helping, like, what's your daily creative practice, and all of a sudden it's like,
Right.
I feel validated. And it's not that you had to see it
Yes.
or anyone else had to see it. All of a sudden their ideas on paper and they're like, it's real now, and now I
Yes.
can move on from it, or I can elaborate on it, or I can grow from it. It's like getting it out in that artistic way, the way that
Mm-hmm.
they feel authentic, can change how they view it and really move through even really difficult things like depression and
Mm-hmm.
trauma and
Yeah,
burnout.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even in terms of depression, right? Like, so when I even now when I'm like the seasonal depression stuff, right? Sun came out thankfully, after being away for like I don't know, went on vacation for like 2 weeks, and I'm like, oh, the sun is back. Thank you. You start to feel a little off. You start to feel kind of depressed. You start to feel a little like, ugh. And what happens then is you get stuck in your head. You get stuck with all these thoughts kind of on repetition, right? And they're not serving you. And for me, it's like I need to take action. Because if I take action, I'm breaking that pattern. I'm doing something to get myself out of my head and start going in a direction. That's why I think daily routines and rituals and habits are so important, because they give you that place to go, okay, I'm not thinking about this. I'm just simply getting into my habit. And once I'm in my habit, I'm acting. And now I'm out of my head. And I can, if I need to re enter my head for a creative process, it's a different thing. And so I think, it's being intentional, like we said about that. And then I think the other part of that too is I don't know why, but as creative people, we reserve our creativity for the thing that we're making and like a technique, ideas. But for some reason, it never dawns on us that we need to actually apply our creativity in making time for our creativity a lot of times,
Mhm.
and what that looks like. Getting creative when we have challenges, instead of saying, well, this doesn't show up either intuitively, therefore I'm not going to do it until it does show up intuitively, which a lot of times doesn't, or I just simply can't because the season of my life I have X, Y, and Z. And I understand people have different lives and constraints and things that they're dealing with. And I certainly don't want to minimize anything. But what I am saying is sometimes it's that creativity in terms of problem solving for ourselves to go, this is what this looks like right now.
Mhm.
I said this is important. Okay, well, then let me get creative. And how do I apply this in what I've got to deal with? Like, what can that look like? And that's a great starting point, I think, for people.
Yes, it's like we've said, it's the intentionality of it, but it's also being realistic. I
Yes.
help lots of busy entrepreneurs and multimillionaires. I help single moms. And you want to know what the main thing, and I bet you hear this all the time too. I just don't have time. I don't have
Mm-hmm.
time for self-care. I don't have time to heal. I have XYZ. And whether it is a meeting about a $2 million deal, whether it is you're taking care of 5 kids and you do not have time to breathe. I was like, there is always time. We just have to intentionally find it. And creating can be happen in seconds. It doesn't have to
Mm-hmm.
happen in hours. And it's the same with self-care. I'm always like, at the stoplight, you take 2 extra deep breaths. You're
Yeah.
at a stoplight. There's nothing else you're gonna do anyway. Do it. Wash your hands for 30 more seconds in the bathroom. And people are like, that's not self-care. It's like, yes, it is. It's just not a bubble bath. It's
Mm-hmm.
not a weekend at a spa. It is just as important. Those 2 deep breaths, those 30 seconds of washing your hands are just as important as the huge chunks of
Mm-hmm.
the muse helping you,
Mm-hmm.
because it everyone has this up here expectation,
Yeah.
right? That it's like, oh my God, it's gonna be amazing and I'm gonna have all this money and time. And it's like, no, it's gonna be 30 seconds and you're going to, like I do, you're gonna pick up your phone, hit record, you're not going to worry about what you look like, and you're just gonna say the idea so that you can use it later when you
Mm-hmm.
actually have time to use it. But that I wouldn't create anything if I didn't do those messy things. The
Yeah.
things that like they're like, oh, you'll remember. No, I won't. No, I won't. I try very hard not to lie to myself as an adult. I will remember that, and I don't have to pee are the 2 biggest lies that adults tell each other. We say it to ourselves every day, every single day. I'm going to remember that. I know where I put that. No, you don't. No, you don't. And you're never going to find it again because now your house ate it because you put it in the safest place imaginable.
Mm-hmm.
Narnia. Like, no. So it's being really realistic about your creative process and knowing that those tiny things lead to the bigger things.
Mm-hmm.
And
Absolutely.
unfortunately, the hard truth, we're gonna hurt some feelings now. You don't get the big things without the small things.
Mm-hmm.
You don't get to create big without doing the small things. You're not gonna jump to big. You're not gonna jump to big with your healing, with your creating, with your art. It's not going to happen because if you don't have 30 seconds, you're not going to have 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
That's just
Yeah.
the way it is.
Yeah. Yeah. So much of it is flexing muscles. It's creative muscles. And to put it in another analogy, it's like going to the gym, right? Like people want to wait for, I'm going to go to the gym for an entire afternoon and just go crazy and get it all out and just kind of, what'll end up happening is you hurt yourself or you're going to be really sore and then you're not going to be thinking about going back again anytime soon because you've overextended yourself. Instead, going in small increments, building things up over time, and it's like you said, I mean, if somebody had all of a sudden a large block of time or resources available to them, the sad thing is that they might not even know what to do with it once they've had it because they haven't been regularly practicing. They haven't been engaging with that. And that's the other part of the small deposits is that it gets you engaged in a way that you're able to get into the mindset of creativity a lot quicker. You're able to access things a lot quicker. Also, if you have tools and supplies and you have a place that you actually do something and you can leave it out, you can start to actually get into your creative process quicker because you're not spending all your time trying to set up and think about what am I going to do and all the other things that prepare you for creating as opposed to actually doing the creating in that time. So I definitely get into those conversations all the time as well.
Yes, it's not just a designated time and mindfulness and intention, but it's a designated space, whether that's a space in
Mm-hmm.
your head or a space in your house. Because you're right, it's so much easier. And I know like minimalists and organizers are going to hate this, but leaving stuff out to do like, I will do my self care so much better if I just leave it out. I will scrapbook so much more often if it's already on the table. If it's not on the table, it's not. I have to carry out just for okay, let's do a small task. Jewelry making earrings, super small, right? They're small. I'm not gaudy, they're small earrings. That is 5 different buckets.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the buckets are like this, some of the buckets are big, but that is 5 buckets that I have to haul from one room to another and then unpack. That's not happening more than once a season, not gonna lie. But if you have like a designated space that's just set up, it makes things so much easier. And I think that's a very good point too. What are you doing to make it easier? Are
Mm-hmm.
you putting it in your calendar? Are you having an idea board? Are you making sure that you have a designated space for it? Like there are ways to make creating health easier. It doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be hard. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's effort. It is absolutely 100% effort. It doesn't have to be hard. And I think that's a misconception that people have about it. It's like it they're making it so much harder for themselves. And it's like if you have a spare room that nobody is using, why is the easel not set up?
Mm-hmm.
Why? Give me a reason. And they're like, oh, well, that room is for guests. Since COVID, when's the last time you had a guest over? Once it was my mom. She stayed for two
Mm-hmm.
days.
Yeah.
Well, that room for all that 3 years minus 2 days can be set up for painting. And then they're
Mm-hmm.
like, no, it can't. It's meant for guests.
Mm-hmm.
It's your head. It's meant for you.
Yeah.
Oh, how often do you hear that? That it's like, no, I can't do this because someone
Mm-hmm.
outside of me has access to the me that needs to create.
Yes, absolutely. And there's two issues I see a lot. One is the need for validation externally. So they're looking for someone to give them permission. They're looking for someone to tell them it's okay for them to do these things or for them to say when they do these things that they're doing a good job. And I think cultivating that sense internally is so vital because you're the one who's has domain over yourself, right? You have agency over yourself. And what happens in your life or doesn't happen is tied to you and the choices you make and how you show up in life. And so that's sometimes a hard truth. The other thing is that if someone repeatedly has a lot of objections of, like you said, they didn't set up the easel in the spare room and they're like, well, it's the guest room and it's the laundry list of things, again, the hard truth of that is a lot of times exposing that there's actually fear underneath that. Because if I set up that easel, that means I'm actually going to have to do something. And I don't know if I'm really ready to do something, or I don't know what that something would look like. And so it's easier for me to just keep saying, it's about something else. It's about something else, and not really uncover the fact that deep down it's about fear
Yeah.
and not wanting to even face that fear. And the problem is that can go on for years and years and years, and someone can never get to that point where they're actually engaging with their creativity or their art and feeling that sense of fulfillment, and yet they'll blame everybody else and everything else except themselves.
Yes, I love it. I have a story for you, and it is okay, it's sad, but keep in mind I'm sassy. Okay, come at it from a
Hmm.
sassy point of view.
Sure.
So, when dating, oh yeah, you will know if you need to break up with someone the second they make your creativity less. Here is the story. I dated a guy just for a few weeks, and I own my own house, right? And I am a hobgoblin. I will eat on the couch. Like I have no problem. You want to know why? Because my beautiful, it's a gorgeous butcher block table. You want to know what it's used for? Creating only.
Mm.
I do projects on this table. This is where I spread out. This is where I make my life happy. And I had a giant scrapbooking project on it. And the first time he came over, he was like, "No, no, this won't do. You have a dining room table. We will eat at the dining room table when I am here." And so I actually had to pack up all of my crafts. And for the few weeks that I dated him, I didn't do any crafts. I didn't create anything because he took away the space in my own goddamn house. Let me tell you what, he got dropped so fast. Like I was like, it's my table. It's my crafts. It's my space to create who I am. And he was like, "No, no, no, that's a dining room table. It's used for dining." And I'm like,
Hmm.
I cannot have you in my goddamn life. I can't. And I think that's a really big thing. If someone is not allowing you to create, no, there either needs to boundary or they need to go. Like if there's someone that you can't get rid of, like a kid, set a boundary. This, I have a client who, for 15 minutes a day and only 15 minutes a day, she has 6 children. Bless her. 6 children. 15 minutes a day, unless the house is actively on fire, that is her time. She'll read, she'll write poetry, she'll light a candle, she'll
Hmm.
meditate. 15 minutes every single day, no matter what. And all 6 kids have to, and the husband has to take care of everything for 50. And that's what it is. And I'm like, yes, nobody said no, but she created a boundary. It's like, nope, this,
Hmm.
unless the house is on fire, leave me alone for 15 minutes every single day. And that's
Yeah.
what it, and she created it. If someone is blocking you creating even space for yourself, no, that's a boundary or an out. That's an automatic out. So yeah, you can imagine how well that went. Clean off your table. I will be eating here with me. You can imagine how quickly that guy was
Yeah.
forced out. Just like, oh, leave.
Yeah. Yeah, it's important to know yourself and know that you need to sometimes fight for that right to be able to. I sound like the Beastie Boys now. Fight for your right. Fight for your right not to party, although you can do that too. But for creativity, to make sure that you're doing that thing that's life giving to yourself. And honestly, if you're with somebody, they want you to be the best version of yourself,
Yeah.
unless they've got some hangups or insecurities. And so, like, yeah, be with somebody who wants that for you, who goes, you know what? I'm going to actually make sure that you're doing this, not just allow for it, right? But
Yep.
I'm going to set you up for as much success as possible because I know that it's important to you. And what's important to you is going to be important to me.
Mhm. I love that. I love that. So creating is like a completely singular thing, but it's also, you can create with other people. I know I have one of my clients is a best-selling author and they have sprints, they're writing sprints where everyone logs onto a Zoom. It's like 4 or 5 people and everyone is completely silent and they all just write. But
Hmm.
that way they're all getting it done and it's creating that space and everyone is supportive. And obviously if they have a question they'll unmute and be like, "I don't know if this is right." But it's, you want to surround yourself with people. I want people around me who make me go, "Oh yeah, I can do that." Like,
Hmm.
why wouldn't I want to make you a scrapbooked card? Why wouldn't I want, to be covered in paint one day? Like, why wouldn't I?
Yeah.
I love those, and I feel like that's such an important thing that once you figure out the you figure out the y'all of it. Like
Hmm.
that is so beautiful. So do you have any final comments about creating and art and all the fabulousness that you do?
Yeah. I would say just make sure that you're taking steps to do that in whatever way that looks right for you. And if you're not sure, pick an access point, do something, right? I say this all the time and I truly mean it. And I say, when you create, we all win. And what I mean by that is when you create, like you're winning because you're showing up, being the better version of yourself, growing as a person, getting that self expression time, all those things. And so you feel fulfilled. But then also, a lot of times, the people around you win too, because you're being the best version of yourself, you're being fulfilled. Sometimes what you create, you're sharing with the people around you, and their lives are being enriched. Maybe it's solving a problem, maybe it's bringing joy, maybe it's whatever that looks like. They win also because they're like, I'm so glad that you decided to show up and do what you do best and to be engaged in this process and to keep doing that again and again. So I think there's more at stake than a lot of times we acknowledge,
Mm.
because again, it can be scary. And also, a lot of people don't know even what to do. They need a process. And so that's where I really try and stand in that gap and say, let's do this. Let's give you some steps, practical steps and inspiration.
Yes, I love that. And it's about the mindfulness, the creating space. And when you do that, you're able to create and heal so much more.
Hmm.
Once you look at it and really take it from an intentional point of view, like we were talking about. So I love that. If someone wants to contact you to be a client to help with their daily creative, how would they do that? Can you tell us how people
Sure.
can contact you?
Yes, the easiest place is to go to my website, which is mikebrennan.me, M-E. From there, you'll find the links out to all sorts of things like the Daily Creative Habit email newsletter you can sign up for that comes free once a week. I give some daily prompts so people can try some things if they want to, along with some inspiration. I have a lot of other resources there, a journal that is kind of a self-guided thing. I have a book, Make Fun a Habit, which helps with creativity and fun. And of course, yeah, someone wants to work with me one on one. There's opportunity there for creative coaching, as well as I do businesses and corporations and coming in and talking them through the creative process and really being intentional about innovation. So, all those places right there, my website.
See, and that's just making me excited. Oh my God. See, I'm happy. I'm happy now. Now I want to like go and like write a book or something. See, just
Yeah.
being around him is so like it just gets you going. It gets your creativity. Just it's like, yes, I want to do something. I want to do something fabulous. And it's gonna be world changing. Like, oh, you're so inspiring. I love it. Thank you so much for joining us, for sharing your expertise, for making this a safe space to create, which let's be honest is a hurdle for a lot of people
Yes.
with self-doubt and trauma and everything that they don't feel like they can to create that space is so thank you so much for doing that. We hope to have you back on here again. Thank you to all the listeners for coming and joining and having fun with us today. Like, share, follow, and if you have questions, comment and reach out. We are more than happy to answer any questions that you have about creativity and creating space for yourself. So go forth, be the hero of your own story, everybody. And again, Mike, thank you so much.
Thank you.